In a world ravaged by war and shaken by fear, six men stepped forward, not with guns, but with ideas. Not with speeches, but with strategy. They weren't presidents, they weren't kings, but they shaped the second half of the 20th century more than almost anyone else. They were called the Wise Men, and their story, told by Evan Thomas and Walter Isaacson, is not just history. It's a lesson in leadership, character, and legacy. Imagine a room not filled with celebrities, not crowded with generals, but with men whose quiet words could move nations. These were not household names. They weren't seeking applause. They were crafting policy, peace, and power behind closed doors. They were called the Wise Men. 6 of them, each brilliant, each burdened with the weight of the world, trying to rebuild itself. There was Dean Acheson, elegant, razor sharp, with a mustache as precise as his words. He was the architect of America's stance in the Cold War. It was Acheson who helped draft the Truman Doctrine, who once said, "The future comes one day at a time." He didn't panic. He planned. Then there was Averell Harriman, railroad heir turned diplomat. He'd made millions before most men finished college. But he walked away from it all to negotiate with tyrants, to bridge worlds. Where others saw threats, Harriman saw strategy. He moved in silence, but his steps shaped history. George Kennan, the thinker. While others shouted war, Kennan wrote 3,000 words from Moscow, a letter known as the Long Telegram. In it, he warned, the Soviet Union will not fall to force, but to patience. From the telegram came containment, the bedrock of US foreign policy for the next 4 decades. Kennan didn't lead with power, he led with clarity. Robert Lovett, the man behind the curtain. He shaped the Marshall Plan, designed the modern US military, and mentioned nearly every Secretary of Defense for a generation. He avoided the spotlight, but every decision carried his fingerprints. Then there was John McCloy, a man so connected they called him Chairman of the American Establishment. He advised presidents, rebuilt Germany, ran the World Bank, and yet remained humble, disciplined, strategic. To McCloy, power wasn't something to display, it was something to steward. And finally, Charles Bolin, the quiet voice in rooms filled with tension. He was America's interpreter to Stalin. Not just in language, but in mindset. He understood the Russian soul. He helped prevent misunderstandings that could have lit the world on fire. 6 men, one mission to guide America through its most dangerous century. They didn't chase fame, they carried responsibility. And in a time of great noise, they chose to speak wisdom. The year is 1945. The world is no longer spinning with hope. It's reeling from unimaginable loss. Europe is a graveyard of dreams. Entire cities, Dresden, Warsaw, Tokyo, have been turned to ash. 20 million are dead in the Soviet Union alone. Families walk among ruins, searching for loved ones. Children play in craters where homes used to be. The war is over, but peace feels like a broken promise. Back in America, victory parades ring through the streets, but beneath the celebration, there's fear. What happens next? Millions of soldiers return, looking for jobs. Europe is starving. Japan is shattered. And a new threat, one more dangerous than the last, is rising from the east. Stalin's Soviet Union. While America demobilizes, the Soviet Union expands. It tightens its grip on Poland, Hungary, East Germany, building what Churchill would call an Iron Curtain. Trust crumbles. Allies become rivals. The world holds its breath as the Cold War begins to take shape. There is no roadmap for this, no manual titled How to Rebuild a World. The choices made in the next few years will shape the next 50. It is in this chaos, this vacuum of leadership, that the wise men step forward. They don't have TikTok or viral speeches. They have conviction, vision, history books on their desks. They understand something few others do, that power without wisdom is a recipe for destruction. So, they begin crafting a new world order. Not perfect, but principled, where America doesn't dominate, but leads. Where peace isn't just the absence of war, but the presence of strength, unity, and foresight. This was their moment. The world didn't need noise. It needed wisdom. And that's exactly what they gave. None of these men ever became president. Few were household names. But behind every major move, Truman stands in Berlin. NATO's formation, the rebuilding of Germany and Japan. You'd find one of them at the table. Calm, strategic, quietly shaping the world. They advised Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy. They never needed the spotlight because they weren't driven by ego. They were driven by service. In a time of chaos, they became the adults in the room. They weren't perfect, but when stakes were highest, they led with principle, not politics. What made these men wise? It wasn't just experience, it was their character. They read widely, they listened more than they spoke. They saw nuance where others saw black and white. George Kennan once said, "Heroism is endurance for one moment more." And that's how they lived, holding the line, quietly carrying the burden, choosing diplomacy over drama. In today's world of hot takes and headlines, the wise men remind us of a different kind of power, the power of intellect, integrity, and restraint. They've been gone for decades, but their fingerprints remain. When NATO makes the decision, Lovett's blueprint is in the room. When diplomacy saves a war, we hear echoes of Bolin and Harriman. When a young policymaker reads the long telegram, they're stepping into Kennan's shoes. The wise men teaches us that leadership is not about volume, it's about vision. That wisdom is not given by age, but earned through humility, curiosity, and courage. So, here's the question. In your own world, in your own family, your career, your community, can you be one of the wise? Not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the most trusted. The one who steadies the room when storms rise. That's what this book leaves us with. A challenge, a compass, to lead quietly, to serve deeply, to leave behind not noise, but legacy. Be one of the wise.